This is another video about UKIP, the UK Independence Party. So if you're not interested in UK politics, you don't need to watch this. I only mentioned Pat Condell very briefly, so if that's something you're interested in following, then you might not want to follow this one. But I am intrigued. I've just been on the UKIP website, and I'm intrigued to notice that Pat Condell's video about voting policies is still featured. He is still apparently being paraded as a champion of UKIP and providing a kind of celebrity endorsement, which is really interesting, I think, given his more recent video where he describes his allegiance to UKIP. Well, he doesn't describe his allegiance at all. He says his vote for UKIP would be a protest vote, and he doesn't agree with many of their policies. He doesn't agree with their policy on climate change. He doesn't share their opinions on homeopathy, nor does he agree with their opinions on the disestablishment of the Church of England, which are pretty key policies really, and they are all over the literature. So it's pretty odd that UKIP are still using Pat Condell's video as a celebrity endorsement. I mean, it's a bit like the Green Party putting a video of the CEO of BP on their website because he happens to share their views on the closure of local post offices. I don't know, I can't understand the rationale for that, and if there's any UKIP supporters who could explain to me why Pat Condell's video is being featured when he seems to share almost none of UKIP's policies by his own words, apart from the Europe thing, then I'd be intrigued to know what that is exactly. I mean, just about the Europe thing, I mean, there is some interesting things about that. I mean, a lot of the well, this is kind of related to what Pat Condell said, but I think I've heard it from elsewhere as well, that this relationship between England and the other countries, Britain and the other countries that are in Europe, is occasionally compared to the political situation in the States, and the moment that it's usually compared to is independence. You know, the right to self-determination, which the states achieved through the Declaration of Independence. That's the document that's cited, and that's the political moment that's cited. But it isn't really like that at all. I mean, that's a false analogy. I mean, don't forget, Britain has been part of the European community for many, many years. I mean, in geological, kind of geographical terms, we've always been part of Europe. But even in political and economic terms, we have been part of Europe since the 1970s. So this idea that that we're not part of Europe already is just false. I'm sorry, it just is, and that desire to gain independence, or that desire to somehow start self-determining in a way that perhaps we're not right now, some might say, is nothing like the Declaration of Independence. The nearest analogy in US politics would be the secession. You know, the southern states during the Confederacy formed a confederacy, whatever it was, 11 states formed a confederacy and wanted to secede from the Union because they wanted political determination, and we all know what kind of political determination that was. It's much more analogous to that situation. It's not a perfect analogy by any means, these are just analogies, but it's far closer than the Declaration of Independence, which, you know, was, as Pat Condell rightly points out, a really valuable document marking a really important moment of political history. But it's an incorrect citation. Okay. Yeah, just one last thing actually about this Europe thing. I read somewhere, I think it was on the UKIP website, but it might have been elsewhere, that one of the arguments that UKIP make for seceding from the European Union would be because a feeling that most decisions are made in Europe, or many decisions, and I've seen figures of 70 to 75% of decisions being made over there in that Europe. And quite apart from the fact that the phraseology suggests that we are not part of Europe, and when we are, it always sounds like someone from Doncaster or from Halifax or from Liverpool saying, oh, those decisions are always made in that London, you know, those decisions that affect us here in the north, or those decisions that affect us here in Cornwall are always made up in that London. It's parochialism at its worst, I think, but it always smacks of that when people talk about decisions being made in that Europe, as if we're not part of that Europe. But also this idea that you can reduce the decision-making process and reduce the political impact to a figure like 70% and say, well, those decisions, that legislation is being made there, therefore that's what affects our lives. It's not really like that at all. I mean, things like the decisions about whether one person has a job or not, or decisions about what the price they will pay for goods and services. I mean, those decisions aren't made anywhere. They're made in the global marketplace, and those, quite honestly, those are the decisions that are made that affect people's lives much more than some arbitrary bit of legislation. And if you look at the legislation from Europe, most of it is not going to affect anybody, really. It's not going to affect their daily life in any significant way. Whereas something like the price of goods and services absolutely would. And whether they have a job tomorrow, absolutely would, and the state of their pension rights, absolutely would, and their mobility and the facility to work in different parts of Europe. Those are really important decisions, and those decisions aren't made somewhere else. We make those decisions together. And quite honestly, if we weren't in Europe, different sets of decisions were being made. The fact that we're in Europe means that a set of decisions are put in train there, which are reducing the price of things, for a start. If we try to pull out of Europe now, we would, I don't know why we'd want to do that, I can't imagine why, but if we wanted to pull out of Europe now, everything we buy pretty much will go up in price. Unemployment will go up. I know it's not how it's phrased. It's always as if these migrants are coming in from Eastern Europe and taking our jobs. That's just rubbish, I'm afraid. Unemployment will go up globally if we pulled out of Europe. There simply wouldn't be the manufacturing industries and the service industries that we have now would not have a market to supply, so employment would naturally go down. So prices would rise, unemployment would go up, mobility would be much harder. It would be do we really want to make those decisions? I mean, those are the kinds of decisions which are really being made. And I don't think you can balance those kinds of decisions against some random bit of legislation, which quite honestly, if you do spend a bit of time and looking what kind of legislation is being made in Europe, most of it won't affect anybody, but things like prices, things like employment, things like mobility absolutely do. So again, if anyone from UKIP has got something to say about that, those kinds of figures, about what the real decisions that affect people's lives, I'd be fascinated to hear them. Yeah, I think that will do.